Seth Godin wrote in his book, The Dip, "Quit or be exceptional, average is for losers." And I love this, and I love it for a few reasons. First, it calls out the fact that if we are going to live, we might as well live in pursuit of the exceptional. Why just float by? Why just stand there while time elapses around you? No, seek out the things that matter. Exist not in life's shadows, but in its fringes, where few look but the best things live. The places where most only dream of but the courageous go. Quit or be exceptional. Second, it suggests that quitting isn't always a bad thing. And context is everything here. It's a beautiful thing if it's done for the right reason. In other words, it's far better to quit the wrong thing to pursue what matters than it is to stay and immerse yourself in a lifelong dance with mediocrity. It's not that you quit, it's why you quit. I have a problem with the word quit to begin with. Stopping the wrong thing is less quitting than it is pivoting. It's evolving. But ultimately, that's neither here nor there. It's semantics, right? The moral of the story is, if I never quit, personally, what I believe to be wrong for me, I'd still be in the same building I was 10 years ago. And I'm not being emotional here. I'm being practical. To become your best self, you have to shed yourself of the things that aren't you. There's an idea that what we say no to is one of the most important components of growth. So if you take that and create a little thought experiment, if you have the courage to adventure and try new things, some of those new things will inevitably fall short of expectations. They'll be wrong for you. They can't all be aligned. And so what then? You do the wrong things forever? Or do you take the lesson and move on to those level 10 opportunities? That's what this is about. Quit or be exceptional. Leave mediocrity behind. Do you have to? Well, you don't have to do anything, but the question is, what do you want? Because a world where you chase down the exceptional will be better for you. It will be better for those close to you. It will be better for the world at large. You will live a fuller life. And since you can never give more than what you are, it means the amount of value you can then distribute to others will grow. What we give is directly proportional to what we allow ourselves to be. So don't be mediocre. Don't allow that. Don't even entertain the thought that's not you. Quit or be exceptional. Go all in or don't go. Believe in it fully or walk away. Average is for losers. The fence is for people who forfeit the upside in an attempt to escape the downside, completely unaware that the true loss is the moment of reflection years down the road where you wish you had the courage to do a little more, to chase down the things that invigorated you, to wish you'd lived a little more boldly with just a tad more conviction. Quit or be exceptional. Because simply put, whether we realize it or not, we have defied the odds in simply existing. And I don't care that this idea is pushed to the point of it being cliche. I still don't think we get it. I don't think we've grasped the magnitude. Perhaps a metaphor we could use to help us think about it, and still not indicative of our reality, but worth a shot, is walking into a theme park and spending the entire day standing by the entrance, holding the ticket, right? Or being handed a lottery ticket and keeping it in your pocket, for fear of what could go wrong when you cash it out. Being there, but not experiencing there. See, chasing down the exceptional feels good because it's what you were meant to do. And if you haven't found it yet, don't give up. Find what lights you up until you can capture it and immerse yourself in it. Be the best at it. Let curiosity lead you to exploration and findings that few would be tenacious enough to discover. Quit or be exceptional. Or maybe better put, don't stop pursuing that thing worthy of your commitment. And once you have that target, go. Like everything is riding on it, go. Like it's the sun around which all else revolves, go. Life is simply too short to leave your greatness on the shelf. If you build yourself up, the world conforms. One of my favorite stories is in Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. Towards the end, he talks about a father and a son. I'm going to kind of paraphrase it and give my best interpretation here. It's been a while since I've read it, but in this story, there's a father and a son. The father's tucking his son into bed. And he says, "Son, I want you to know tomorrow I took the entire day off, and it's going to be you and me, and we're going to play and enjoy the day and have an amazing time." And the son is so excited to hear this that he can barely fall asleep. Right? Just makes his day, lights him up. So father says goodnight, walks out. Eventually the kid falls asleep. Fast forward to the next day. Bright and early, the father's downstairs sitting at his table. He hears his son, the little footsteps sprinting across the hall, and he goes, "Here we go." Down the stairs, the kid comes, sits at the kitchen table right across from his father. He goes, "Dad, let's go, it's time. Let's go play, let's go have fun." And the father's excited, right? The dad is ready to rock and roll, but he also thinks, as many of us have, it would be nice to just get 15 or 20 more minutes here to enjoy the morning, right? Sip the coffee, finish reading the newspaper. And the dad comes up with an idea. He says, "Okay, son, how about this?" He rips a page out of the newspaper he's reading, and he tears it into about 20 pieces. And on this page was a globe. It was a picture of the earth. He places these 20 pieces of the earth in front of his son, and he says, "The second you complete this puzzle and you put the earth or the world back together, I'm going to be done with my coffee. We'll go right outside and the day will begin." Right? Picks up his newspaper, continues reading, smiling to himself, thinking, "Hey, I just earned myself that 15 minutes. Well, sure enough, a minute and a half goes by. He feels a tug on his newspaper. He looks up, he goes, "No way." Son says, I'm done, I finished it." He looks over, sure enough, the puzzle is complete. He says, "Son, how did you do that?" And the kid said, "Well, a piece fell on the floor," right? They have a glass kitchen table. And he said, "And when I went down to pick it up and I looked up through the glass, I could see that on the other side of the globe was a picture of a man. And so I put the man together because that was easier." The idea being, the concept being, when you build the man, when you put the man together, the world falls into place. And that right there is, I believe, one of the most critical things I've ever learned. And I'll talk a little bit about when I feel like that light bulb went off for me. But that was everything, right? Jim Rohn says it a little bit of a different way. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, it's not getting there. It's not the result or the mountaintop. It's who you become along the way. It's those instances where you look over your shoulder and you realize during the pursuit, throughout the process, you've become more capable. You've become wiser, more competent. And that's the ticket to so many doors opening. So I want to talk about 3 things that I believe help you build yourself. The first thing is identifying a North Star or identifying an ideal, which might seem simple, but again, it's the simple things that we often overlook. And by the way, there's often a hefty price for overlooking them, right? So that's the first thing, identifying the North Star. The second thing is, okay, we have our North Star, but what can we say goodbye to? What can we cut off that we no longer need? And the third thing is, once we have that information, starting, which is a project in and of itself, and I'll talk a little bit about the mindset behind that. First things first, identifying your North Star. To me, this comes down to a simple understanding. You have so much more control of your life than you think you do. And it's not your fault for not thinking that or not seeing that. It's just something we do without being conscious and being aware. We conform. We live the life we feel like we're expected to live. I've often talked about in my videos being 26 years old and that being the moment, the turning point for me. Why? Well, because I went to high school to get to a good college, to get a good job, to move up the corporate ladder. I was 4 years into that job, and I looked around thinking, maybe I don't need to live for the weekend, right? Maybe I don't need to get up every day feeling obligated to do something that doesn't light me up. Maybe I have more control over my life than I thought. There's an idea that everything around you, everything in your life is there because in some way or another, you've allowed it to be there. You've said yes to the people you see every day, how you spend your time, where you go, what you do, all those things. If they are in your life, whether it's subconsciously or, very blatantly, you have said yes. And so it's realizing, hey, there's something else out there for me that matters, that's meaningful. The last 10 years, it's been the hardest 10 years of my life. There's no question. Bringing something into existence that was not there, working to grow it, to expand it, working to grow myself as a person, right? But throughout it all, I've cultivated meaning. I get up in the morning and I think, this matters. I have a purpose that I care about, that lights me up. To me, that's the goal. And to find that and identify that is everything. J.R.R. Tolkien in Lord of the Rings, he says, not all who wander are lost. We need to give ourselves permission to seek that out. To look around and realize, hey, some of my life, some of the things I do every day, I'm sure some of it's beautiful, right? But some of it just happens. That's life. Some of it falls into place and doesn't make us better and doesn't excite us and has nothing to do with where we want to go. And so we need to be able to differentiate those things and start gravitating towards something that matters. The second one is a little bit, it's quicker. It's associated to the first one, right? The idea of, okay, now you have that thing or you have an idea of that North Star. Find the courage to cut away those things that aren't going to help you get there. Another form of freedom, that shackle around your ankle that you've been carrying with you. Greg McKeown, his book, I Scream It from the Mountaintops, Essentialism, was the first person to teach me, hey, growth is not always acquiring. Sometimes growth is getting rid of those things we are carrying around. We carry too much. Empty your pockets of the burdens. Free yourself of those things. And that, again, comes back to this awareness. It comes back to looking around and doing an audit of how you spend your time. And it's mind-boggling. Like to take a day, for example, and really pay attention to everything you did and try and look into the rationale behind it and where it's taking you. A lot of things we do just to do. That's what you need to take an axe to. It's been said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. The internet attributes that quote to everybody from Lincoln to, Da Vinci. But it's absolutely true. When you can identify what matters and allow your world to revolve around that, magic. That's number 2. And number 3 is go. Start. Which seems easy, right? You take a step. How complicated could that be? Perfection, fear, not knowing. All those things keep us from moving forward. And I want to gift you with this thought that helped me tremendously. You're not supposed to know. You're not supposed to know how things work out. You're not supposed to have the answers. You're not supposed to have a perfect map or game plan. Life is chaos. It's supposed to be messy. And the people that get the most from it smile and step into that abyss knowing they'll pick those pieces up along the way. That's not a little detail involved in personal growth. That is personal growth. That's the whole thing. That's the story. You go before you're ready. Because you'll never be ready. And I can find those people, I can point to them talking about what they're gonna do if only. They're gonna start something when X, Y, and Z happens. Well, that's a forever game. You go before you're ready. Even this studio, right? This is a new studio, it's a new setup, just a little spark to reinvigorate creativity and production. It's like moving things around. Is it perfect? Is everything lit up? Should I be closer to the camera, further from the camera? All these things that I'm going back and forth with until I hit that ultimate, light bulb moment. Who cares? Pick up the mic, say something, and iterate. 10 versions from now, 10 videos from now, this probably will not be the same. Perfect. But there will not be 10 videos from now if you don't go. And so that's what I encourage you. I encourage you to remember that perfection is just fear in disguise. The people that wait for all the answers before they start, they wait forever. Your time is now, so go. So I'm gonna leave you with that, the beautiful story from Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. When you put the man together, the world falls into place. So give yourself permission to put the man together. The world wants you to win. It has all the tools. It has everything you need. You just gotta go. Put the man together, and the world will fall into place. I wouldn't make excuses for you. I wouldn't look you in the eye and tell you everything is great, when in actuality the wheels are falling off the wagon. No, I'd point to the insufficiencies and remind you that you're capable of chipping away at them. I think that pragmatism can save someone's life. But guess what? Being human is knowing there are things you don't know. Realizing that growth is picking up little understandings along the way and bringing them with you into the future. Allowing them into the evolution that is you. And part of my personal evolution was coming face to face with the fact that looking forward isn't all of it. It's part of it. Yeah, we need to be better, of course. Yeah, we can always squeeze more value out of the time allotted to us, 100%. This forward progression, as far as I'm concerned, is intertwined in human fulfillment. But we are, in this moment, the manifestation of the obstacles we've already overcome. We are the times we wanted to stop and didn't. We are the losses we bounced back from and the adversity we forged into opportunity. We're the endings that we melted down into beautiful beginnings. We are the mistakes, the obstacles, the little encounters with hell that didn't define us. but instead changed us. And that matters. So, quick story time. For about 5 years after I graduated college, some of my friends and I had this fantasy baseball league we'd use to stay in touch, right? And I think even they would begrudgingly admit that I was oddly good at it. I won like 3 or 4 out of the 5 years or something like that. And you know what my strategy was? It was simple. I picked players based on who they were over the course of their career, not based on how they performed last year, which is a trap people seem to fall into, right? So a guy that hits 30 home runs 6 years in a row, and then last year suddenly only hits 7, it's not out of the question to think he'll hit 30 again, revert back to the mean, to his average, his track record. That, to me, is more meaningful than some recent struggle, and I took that bet every time. Now, as you can imagine, the point I'm making here has nothing to do with baseball. It has everything to do with life in general. So much of the time, we completely focus on the current insufficiencies, the bad things happening now, the misfortunes in our lives. We're striking out, and our brain goes into panic mode. It says gap. Gap, gap, how do we fill it? And again, yes, that's important, right? Our plan for resurgence is necessary, but we can't forget who we are and what we've done. We can't overlook our track record. As the saying goes, you've survived 100% of the bad days. You've lived through countless struggles. You've climbed out of many catastrophes, at least I have. And it seems as though it's when we need that reassurance most that we are most inclined to forget. It's when we, more than any other time, need to prove to ourselves that we are unconquerable, that we question our ability to persevere. I'd never say to you the road ahead will be easy. I'm not saying it won't suck at times. I'm not saying it won't take all of you. I'm merely saying that you are equipped to emerge victorious, to handle not some of it, but all of it. I'm saying that the person in the mirror is stronger than you can even imagine. But understand, you're not operating on blind faith here. You're not hoping for some miracle. You're operating on your own record of success. What you do is find a way. What you do is win. You don't believe me? Look over your shoulder. Take a trip down memory lane. Glance back at all the mountains you've already climbed. And life, it won't be smooth sailing all the time. You'll have your slumps and your adversity, no question. But they're not you. They are what you were made to navigate. Everything has brought you to this point. And it's great to focus on this point, but don't lose the everything. Sometimes it's not about who you will be someday. Sometimes it's about what you've already become. It's about who you are now. I'm gonna be selfish, because this message is exactly what I need right now. Exactly what I need to walk myself through. And so I'm gonna dive into it fully with the hope that in some context, in some capacity, you can pull this message or idea and inject it into your own life. Whatever it is you're going through, whatever it is you're navigating. Long story short, it's the shiny objects again. It's forgetting what brought me here, what I love, what matters most. It's looking around, knowing the destination, but spending time doing me things that aren't bringing me there. So how does that happen? Misalignment tends to sneak up like a lion stalking its prey. In fact, sometimes I imagine the value of a giant mosquito net that could be placed around the things that matter so that all that complexity can't make its way in. Let the externalities remain external, right? And I walk and I think and I wonder, why is simplicity so difficult to protect? Why is alignment always seeking to collapse in on itself? And personally, why is my inclination, the second I stop paying attention, to wander off the tracks and navigate in circles? And well, that's the good news. It's like when you realize you've wandered off track or you're in arenas that aren't yours, you can finally do something about it. In fact, that may be the most important part. Life is about casting and reeling in. Casting and reeling in. It's fire, aim. Fire, aim. Fire, aim. Maybe wandering places we shouldn't be shines the greatest spotlight on where we should be. It's the best way to wake up one's intuition. Because intuition tells you what you already know. But its magic is that it tells you so loudly that it drowns out the minutia. The brain needs the heart. Otherwise, we become capable doers of meaningless things. I think life-changing things generally are not complex things. All right, let's do the exercise. The same exercise I've been doing for years. The ultimate self-awareness assessment. A, where is your finish line? Close your eyes. Do you see it? Can you picture it? Okay, perfect. Now B, how are you spending your time? And is how you're spending your time taking you to that finish line? Is who you're spending your time with taking you to that finish line? Or maybe you need to shake the snow globe entirely. Maybe you need to define what your finish lines are, which may just be the spot I currently find myself. Micro example, the other day I was with my trainer doing some barbell overhead shoulder press and was focusing on the top of the movement. And he says, look, for what we are trying to do here, sculpt and define your shoulders, you're paying attention to things that don't matter, that are not creating the greatest impact. The greatest impact is going to be the lower third of the movement. So focus there, right? And it's a smaller example of a macro question. Are you focusing your time and energy on the things that are going to get you to where you need to be? J.R.R. Tolkien wrote through his character Gandalf, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. I love that quote. That quote is everything, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. We are what we do, what we focus on. And so when time passes, when we look around and see less and less correlation between how time is spent and where we want to be, the e-brake needs to be pulled. Expecting something without committing to the required action to bring it to life, well, that's pretty close to delusion, if you ask me. And I've danced around that flame of delusion many times before. Right? Sometimes without thinking or ignorance, sometimes simply being wrong. But it's happened, right? Like, why am I not gaining muscle or improving my physique? I would ask myself as I ran 10 miles a day, 6 days a week in South Florida. Obviously, there's a misalignment there. Seems obvious now. So obvious that it's almost laughable. But that was just a misunderstanding, right? Actions and expectations unlinked. And to those not familiar with this arena, This one may seem a bit out there, but I decided recently to stop calling myself an entrepreneur and instead start calling myself an artist or a creator. Why? You might even think, who cares what you call yourself? Stop being so vain. But here's the reality. We follow through on who and what we believe ourselves to be. Sure, there are entrepreneurial elements in brand building, content creation, the media business. But also, my circle consists primarily of entrepreneurs. My friends all have businesses, have exited businesses, they're growing and scaling businesses. And so naturally, without even thinking about it in a lot of ways, I start to look at my work more and more procedurally, systems, workflows, scale. Great, to an extent. But the magic is in the message, it's in the craft, it's in the creation. I've had to tell myself this 900 different times, 900 different ways. It's like that metaphor about the mosquito net I mentioned not too long ago. It's like, why is everything else trying to collapse in on that truth, on that simplicity? Because every time I deviate from me, I find myself wandering through a desert of discontent. I have to learn this same damn thing every 6 months. And, part of my realization is that's okay. I think growth requires a rewiring and readjustment. Consistent acclimation. But you have to continuously pull back in what matters, right? It was not systems and workflows that got me here. It was telling stories and helping people see the value that surrounds them. So it makes me happy. That's what I'm best at. And I feel like a kid on Christmas every time I come back to that, right? You stretch a little too far, learn, dial it in. Find yourself stronger than you were. Stretch a little too far, learn, dial it back in. Find yourself stronger than you were. It's like going to the gym, breaking the muscle down so that you can be built back up stronger. And so perhaps the value here is an opportunity for you to similarly think to yourself, what am I doing? And is it taking me where I most want to go? And if not, it doesn't mean you've wasted time. It's not an indictment on the steps you've taken or the paths you've walked. It's a celebration of the awareness, of the newness, the novelty in the next chapter. It's a celebration of the fact that you, just like me, can go anywhere we want to go next. The wake of the boat does not drive the boat. This moment in and of itself is new. It's a rebirth, a creation. What will we do with it? We go too far in order to regulate and find ourselves better than we were when that dust finally settles. But what's absolutely imperative is asking the questions. It's looking at your own life like an eagle flying overhead, seeing things holistically, big picture. Emerson said famously, hitch your wagon to a star. So find the star that lights up your soul and make sure each step guides you not away from, but towards that light. Those little blasts of intuition, they matter. They mean something. They are reminding the brain that doing the wrong things will bring empty victories. Trust me, you can win a race you care nothing about, and a lot of people do. Define your terms and execute. Choose your mountaintop and ascend. We explore in order to refine. So let each step be a chiseling away of what no longer serves you, so that you can capture the pieces of life that light up your soul. I'm going to share with you a general metaphor about life. It's brought me a ton of value, helped me maintain perspective over the years, and I think it's going to help you as well. I'm going to be using YouTube as my example here, but worry not. This applies to everything. I just happen to be immersed in the content creation space. So, to frame it, the growth of a YouTube channel is a lot like the stock market. You certainly want it trending up over time. You want your work to reach, as many people as it can. But there are, and have been, segments along the way where that growth slows down. There are times when the channel overall, it just gets less engagement, less views, all of it. And you look at it when that's happening, when you're in the midst of one of those dips and you think, oh no, what have I done? Anytime something you're creating slows down, it can be jolting. And this has over the years occurred many times. And every time my instinct is the same. It's, that type of just duress. And I put a lot of time, energy, effort into this. This work is some of what I'm most proud of in my life. So it's like, sound the alarm, right? Now, I need to figure this out. And every time things eventually correct and continue in that upward trend. Sometimes it takes a little longer than others, but I get there. And here's what I've learned. When there is a dip or a slowing down of anything that's going in the opposite direction of the way you want it to go, I do 4 things. 1, pause and breathe. Because you have to. Recapture that perspective. Life, as I say so often, is simply not that serious, so stop making mountains out of molehills. 2, seek to understand why. There is some sort of change. What's different? What prompted the change? Knowing that is power, so find it. 3, once you have that information, make the necessary alteration. It's not only about having the answer, but it's in implementation. It's adjusting, it's testing. And 4, be patient, trust the process. You can be ferocious in your day-to-day and also calm and poised with the overall process and faith in its unfolding. And so I'm going to give you one more YouTube example, and then we'll pull it up to a level that's more broad and applicable everywhere, right? Something interesting about YouTube is that a lot of channels only have a handful of videos. We'll say 4 or 5 that generate the majority of that channel's interactions, right? It's a pretty common thing. And so when things slow down, you can often point to one of those 4 or 5 videos. So let's say something does. There's a dip. You take that breather. 2, you inquire, pull back the hood. What's going on, right? It looks like one of these videos is not getting clicked as much as it was or it should. Okay, that's great to know. Now what do we do about it? Test different thumbnails, right? Try new ones. And you try and it fails, and you try and it fails, and you try and it fails, and you try and bam, one resonates. This new thumbnail gets clicked 3.3% of the time instead of 2.8. Everything goes back up. Impressions go back up. We have righted the ship. Right? And I know that's a very detailed example. Not everyone's a YouTuber, but everyone's, in their own way, niche down, doing their thing. Right? And so you have to look at it in the context of what you're doing. What's your metaphorical YouTube channel? When things are wrong, how can you pull back the hood, identify that piece, and tweak? Right? If we step outside that box, what we'll find is that life is like that stock market. It's like a YouTube channel. It's not up and up and up. There are lows. There are metaphorical recessions. There are times where it feels like the world is collapsing around us and we think, oh no, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? It's over. In reality, nothing is over. This is the roller coaster ride that is life. You don't get highs without lows. And when you think about it, you wouldn't appreciate them without the lows either. The setbacks are baked into the growth. And I'll use relationships as another example because I know in some way it's relatable to everyone. When the wheels fall off the wagon with the relationship that meant something to you, whether it's a breakup, a falling out with a friend, whatever the case may be, the tendency is to perceive it as a falling down, the walls crashing down, rather than a little blip on your S&P 500. So what do? Same exact plan. 1, breathe. Understand that this is a process and all will be well. 2, you understand the why. You're human. You're going to feel emotion before you can reach any level of necessary pragmatism to fix anything. So allow that to occur. Gather yourself. And then ask what prompted the break. Were you too different? Did you not align? Why? What did you learn about yourself? About the type of people you allow into your life? 3, once you have that information, adjust. How can you be better moving forward? You'll never be perfect. Human beings are complicated and messy, and relationships are not an exact art. Too many variables. But that doesn't mean you can't improve your approach in the future, right? Mitigate some of the mistakes you made. Target the things and people that you truly value. And as you do, and you are, number 4, patient in the process, you'll find things level out and ultimately begin to rise. That situation was not and never was the end of you. It was a necessary low before a future high. And so, 10,000 foot view. Remember that during your difficult times, those moments aren't indicators that life isn't working for you. They are a part of every journey, factors necessary to every ascent. And if you see them as such, you will conquer them, learn from them, and climb them to that place you most need to be. As many of you know, the great Charlie Munger recently passed away. And a friend of mine sent me a video of his most powerful quotes, sound bites. And as I was listening, one stood out to me that I really wanted to share. Charlie Munger said that the acquisition of knowledge is a moral duty. Basically, it's our responsibility to capitalize on the opportunity presented to each and every one of us. We owe that to ourselves, and we owe that to the world. And it just so happened that this particular message was said during a commencement address, talking to an audience of students who weren't ending, but rather were beginning the greatest undertaking of their lives. They'd be released beyond the confines of the campus to go navigate the world. I remember being in that position, right? Asking myself the question, well, what do I do now? Felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And actually, beyond that point, I've found myself at that crossroads many a times. But being that there are really no right answers in life, I find Charlie Munger's advice here even more meaningful. Because it's not about what you're supposed to do. At least not when we zoom out. It's about a willingness to step forward and continuously pursue knowledge. Your personal evolution. It's to try things you've never tried so that you can learn from them. It's going where you've never gone so that you can stretch beyond the boundaries you previously existed in. You owe it to yourself and the world to find what you love and shake that tree until all its fruit is gone. And that's an adventure, not a right or wrong question. Life is not a checklist. It is one great journey. A journey in which we acquire knowledge we never had and become the people we knew we could be. It's a moral duty not to get it right, because again, there is no right. It's a moral duty because you have it within you to change things, to make an impact, to better the people around you. It's a moral duty because you will be a difference maker in whatever arena you choose to step into. And just imagine forfeiting that. Imagine the greatness that would be wasted if you looked in the mirror and thought to yourself, I don't know what that future looks like, so I'll stay here. I don't understand, so I won't go. I'm not where I want to be right now, so hey, this is where we'll close the book. See, endings are just beginnings in disguise, because they set you free to start writing a new chapter, to adjust and reimagine the impact that you can have on the world. Those students, the ones that Charlie Munger was talking to, they aren't done learning. They're merely at an inflection point. And by the way, I think that's why it's so painful to feel stuck, to feel lost. Because our souls want growth, but don't know where to go. We feel confined because the target is uncertain, but I can tell you this. Sometimes knowing that the current chapter is over is enough, is all you need. Sometimes knowing that you no longer need to be where you are is plenty, because it prompts movement. One who is willing to keep their feet going, who's willing to try, make educated guesses and adapt, that is someone who is constantly learning. Someone who's realized that the only way to assure success is not achieved is by standing still. Worrying so much about losing what you currently have that you disregard the infinite upside. It is a moral duty to grow because you are a game changer. You have perspectives and ideas and abilities that will make this place better. And when you look around and think, me? No, you've got the wrong guy or gal here. That just means it's time for you to walk, to move, to create momentum, to stumble into life until you find a little portion of it you want to put a stake in and call your own. And please, this isn't a life is rainbows, butterflies, and everything's magic message. This is a find your thing and give it to the world message. This is a you can always be evolving message. And most importantly, this is a progress is happiness message. Because a life lived to the fullest is one where we are stretching and exploring. We're stepping out into the vast unknown and mapping it for ourselves and others. It's your duty to acquire knowledge and allow that acquisition to propel you into the ether. It's your responsibility to not sit on your gifts, but bring them to life and create that ripple effect that will change the world. When the ground beneath us shakes, we crave stability. When the heavens open up and rain pours down, we run for shelter. When life presents us with vagueness, with flashes of possibility, we long for mastery. It's more instinct than anything else. But could it be that that instinct that we run to like moths to a flame is leading us astray, that it doesn't have our best interests at heart? Could it be that we're so worried about protecting and maintaining an acceptable image for the world that we forget to build something internally that's worth protecting? What if that shaking is what brings down the foundations that held us back? What if that rain washes away the limits of yesterday as we evolve into something more? And what if those flashes of possibility require of us not mastery, no, not yet, but a willingness to be the fool? And what if that willingness isn't an unfortunate dead end, but a beginning? In one of his lectures at the University of Toronto, Jordan Peterson said, if you are not willing to be a fool, you can't be a master. In the cycle that is self-discovery, that is growth, we have to at some point step into an arena that's foreign to us, that we don't yet understand. We have to be willing to operate with inadequate resources, trusting that, they'll be picked up along the way. And that's a lot to take in. It's painful to know that others are going to have knowledge and skills and competencies that you won't. That you'll willingly inject yourself into the bottom of some hierarchy with nothing more than aspirations. But that willingness is your vehicle. And what's clear is that everyone wants the moon, but very few people have the courage to start constructing that spaceship. Very few have the courage to be the student. That's why our inclination is to quit when we can't snap our fingers and magically be on our way, when we can't leap past that wandering around the unknowns. The reality is, we have to fight, to scrap to obtain that sense of belonging in a particular competency. And just talking about it brings me back. It's an obstacle that we all face. It's super real to me. I remember being featured on a podcast where the host literally asked me, why should I listen to what you have to say? Right? Like, who are you? Why are you road mapping your journey? Right? I remember fighting for relevance in an area in which, at the time I knew almost nothing about. And I love how Peterson articulates this battle. He says at some point, you'll want to make a change and you'll feel like an imposter. And guess what? You are. But you have to be. You'll ultimately feel worse if you don't do it. That's imposter syndrome. Feeling like a stranger in your own body. And guess what? It's not wrong. It's just a beginning. I like explaining it like jumping into a cold pool. Feels uncomfortable at first. It feels out of place, but then things normalize. They become comfortable. And what's the other option? To fear that minute of discomfort and never jump in? It's what we need to tell ourselves when we want something, but the climb seems too steep, right? That climb is manageable. You'll acclimate. The adversary's pushing beyond that fear of starting anew. Taking your limited understanding, bringing it to the base of that mountain, a new Goliath, and looking up with confidence. And the question is, can you be foolish enough to do that? And once you've made that ceiling your next floor, will you be foolish enough to do it again and again and again? And breaking through that fear, knowing that stumbling around for a period of time doesn't kill you, it's required. It's the inability to show weakness or appear vulnerable. That's what chips away at you for a lifetime. If you want more, immerse yourself in that cycle of mastery. Start at the bottom and ascend. And when you approach the top, separate yourself and find another ceiling to chase. Replant a seed. Play the role of the fool again. This is the formula for growth, for prosperity, for fulfillment. This is the pathway to anything of substance. You take your L's, you embrace your critics, you swallow your pride, and move towards a tomorrow that far exceeds today. As your reality changes, your perception changes, the company you keep changes, you'll start to see that what's around you is made by people who are willing to fail and fail often. Our world is one devised by those who could put pride on hold, by those who were humble enough to crawl through the unknown long before they ran anything, who knew that before they played for any title or championship, they must first play the fool. Courage is designed to move, which is why one bold action can completely transform your life. It's why one step forward can create space for you to experience and obtain things you've never had before. I've been sharing with you quite a bit lately how I've essentially rediscovered Greg McKeown's idea of essentialism. Redefining focus, cutting away excess, refusing to operate at 65% on many things, right? And instead focusing 100% on the thing that means the most to me, right? Going all in on the right thing. Might seem small, but I promise you, in our world, it's not. And the other day, I was in the car talking about how basically when you go all in on that thing that feels right, alignment's the word I've used many times, but that thing that's right for you, when you give it the attention and time and energy it deserves, the universe seems to hear you. It's like it gives you strength back. And obviously there's a pragmatic element to it, right? It's like what you water is going to grow. You can only improve what you focus on. But that relationship between attention, effort, and life seeming to help pave a way for you when you go all in, it's so strong that it makes me think there might be more to it than that. It blows my mind how quickly, after realigning, things happened that haven't happened in years. It's like you commit to something and life arms you for the journey. You lock in and you are, in your own way, provided wings. And I'm explaining this to Jules, who's riding shotgun. She goes, I love when that happens. It's like courage creates vibration. One of those light bulb moments, right? Exactly. The vibration of courage. Courage creates space for everything you need, right? That courageous act. And by the way, everyone knows what that is in their own world. That thing they should be doing, or that thing they've wanted to do, right? Depending on the season of life. Maybe it's going faster towards something. Maybe it's slowing down a pursuit that isn't quite right. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more. Maybe it's solitude. Maybe it's putting yourself in more social situations, right? Locking in on one thing or exploration and discovery. It's different, it changes. But you know what that is. Because you think about it. Because your soul communicates with your mind. Whatever it is, it's an arm's length away. The extended hand of courage doesn't mean the pursuit or task before you will be easier. In all honesty, it's probably the opposite. You are voluntarily stepping out into the storm. But what courage does, despite the chaos or voluntary turbulence, courage gives you a chance. It puts you in the game and allows you to tell and show the world who you are. I sometimes laugh at the disconnect that once existed between my actions and who I wanted to be. Big plans, big goals. But I was only willing to take minimal risk. The world simply can't hear you from inside your house. It can't translate a dream into a reality or transform hope into tangible progress if it remains tucked away in the back of your mind. Not until you find the courage to set it free, to give it to the world, to start that ripple effect or vibration that will lead you hand in hand into the unknown. When you own that for yourself, the lens through which you look at life adjusts alongside you. Everything is now in the context of how to create that storyline. The same things you once walked right by become props in the play of your life. The right people become wind at your back, and the wrong ones fade back into yesterday's chapter. Life wants to push you forward. It wants to be an ally. So let it. Allow it to be the wind at your back. You have incredible thoughts, brilliant ideas. There are game-changing opportunities that need you to breathe life into them. So here's a thought. I want you to wake up a few minutes earlier this week. If you're a coffee drinker, get yourself a nice cup, sit in a comfortable spot, and for those few moments, get out of your head and into your heart. Paint a picture of what lights you up, a could-be reality. And then choose one courageous act that will take you to that day, that will bring life to that vision. Not tomorrow or the next day, but today. Right now, this very moment, and watch how that consciousness, that decision infiltrates all areas of your life. Watch how it acts as a brush, painting, seemingly a black and white landscape and puts color into it. It's the start of everything. The power you've always had, the sound of strength, the heartbeat of your future self. It's the sunrise before a new day and the sunset that gives way to a sky full of stars. It is the vibration of courage. From your fingertips to God's ears, from your soul to the world, it's where you were meant to go. So my friend, go there. We don't know true silence. And this came to light a few weeks ago during a trip with family and friends. We stayed in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere, about an hour from Zion National Park in Utah. And Ashley, a friend of the family, mentioned that even though our little sanctuary was quiet compared to our normal everyday lives, the airways were still inundated with noise. And so we sat there for a little while, paying attention and listening in on, all the sounds that surrounded us. Planes as they went overhead, it seemed like every 10 minutes or so. And I realized for the first time that even 10,000 feet up, you could hear a plane's engine echoing through the canyons. Cars from the 2-lane road out in the distance could be heard as if they were a few feet away. It was fascinating. Even while staying in a location as remote as ours, we weren't alone. We never experienced total silence. Apparently, there are only a few places in the world where this type of silence exists, and Ashley briefly mentioned them, citing an article she'd recently come across. And I just found the whole thing more and more interesting. It never dawned on me before, the extent to which noise and complexity surrounded us. My normal is one of chaos. Subtle chaos, sure, but chaos nonetheless. You may be wondering, where am I going with this idea? Well, I found value in the understanding that we consistently operate in such an extreme level of commotion, right? We've learned to navigate consistent noise penetrating our existence and our lives, but we haven't really learned how to separate ourselves from it. There is always buzzing, humming, and shaking as we go about our day-to-day. We're so intertwined with our surroundings that even when we seek solitude, we're unable to totally remove ourselves or pull ourselves from the noise. And to me, that weekend was just an incredible reminder of the importance, the significance of remembering to separate ourselves from the world from time to time. The value of truly being alone with our thoughts, shielding ourselves from the externalities. It's not that we have to exist in total silence and solitude, somewhere like northern Washington, which I believe is one of the locations from the article Ashley cited as one of our quietest locations. It's more so that we must realize the world around us is constantly seeking to inundate every thought with impressions and ideas and stories and other noise. The world around us is constantly seeking to influence. That's the $1 million point, right? Even when we don't realize it, we are navigating ideas, engines, and electronics. There is always something placed between who we are and what's most important to us. And it's imperative that we recognize that. See, peace will never fall out of the sky and land at our doorsteps. It must be sought out. The curtains covering who we truly are must be pulled back. And without this concentrated effort, life simply moves us down the stream of life. Well, we assume it was our own swimming that created the change. Control requires separation from the everyday. And so here's to making time to truly separate ourselves from what doesn't matter so that we can focus on what does. To identifying the noise so that we can, when necessary, remove ourselves from it. It is by knowing true silence that we truly know ourselves. And that's a relationship that is invaluable. Find something to make yours. I connect every few months with some of my good friends to strategize, kind of reflect back on the previous quarter, plan for the new one with each of our businesses, kind of share ideas, stuff like that. And I was chatting with my friend Keith about life before he found success in what he's doing now, the struggle and the turbulence he faced, as well as ultimately his decision, and that's entirely what it was, to turn things around. And I've talked about his backstory before, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but essentially he grew up in a very negative environment, dealt with a ton of adversity, but got through it. Started his own national business, installing and repairing commercial pizza ovens, and the guy's just crushing it. And, our conversation in that moment wasn't so much about the doing, it was more on the overcoming and how mentally we had to recreate ourselves to have any chance of moving beyond what we knew. I've talked about it a little before. Kids are simply not taught in school how to thrive, how to build, how to ask more of themselves in the world. They're taught to follow instructions, to do what they need to do in order to pass the exam, to progress to the next level. And there's a gray area, because I'm not saying this is totally valueless, but I am saying that anything beyond that requires a reworking of sorts. You ask anyone who stepped out of that cycle, and they'll tell you the mental and psychological shift that needed to take place. It was almost overwhelming, right? It's a lot, but it's imperative. I recently looked up the word entrepreneurship, and this is the definition. The activity of setting up a business or businesses, taking on financial risk in the hope of profit. And in my mind, it is the risk precisely that's challenging, that brings us so much pain, but also contains within it the reward. It's one of the craziest dilemmas we face. You'll have to endure some of the worst times of your life, but because of that, you'll get to experience highs that would otherwise have been almost completely improbable. We have to rework the thinking that says discomfort equals run away. It's like, no, discomfort equals the price of something better. And sure, it's by no means mandatory, but it's where the upside lives. You have to train yourself to step out into the chaos with the expectation of taming it. And yeah, everything could go wrong, but also everything could go right. And just imagine what that would look like. That possibility alone validates the risk. We just need to convince ourselves. And that risk, by the way, is not just financial. In fact, most of the time it's not. It takes a variety of shapes in our lives. You run the race, you risk losing. You go up and talk to the girl, you risk rejection. You pick up and move somewhere new, you risk winding up somewhere you don't want to be. And maybe temporarily things do fall apart, but maybe you win the race. Maybe you find the love of your life. Maybe you relocate to the happiest place you've ever called home. Calculated risk is the beginning of everything that matters. And so back to the convo. We were talking about the different risks we've taken, how some chapters were fun, some were challenging, and some were both. And how, for me, there was even, from time to time, a conversation where I was asking myself whether it was really worth it. When you're uncomfortable, the mind wants to do one thing, get rid of the discomfort. And I had to convince myself, remind myself that I'm someone who risks good to pursue great. Risk hurts. And somewhere in that conversation was when Keith said he remembers the exact point the risk became worth it. The discomfort became easier to manage. We're so used to taking orders, to playing scared, that the incentive just wasn't there until, Keith's words, it became mine. The most invigorating thing he ever did was find a pursuit to call his own. That's powerful. His business injected him with a new energy and, in essence, a new life because he suddenly had a stake in the game. And I think that's what so many of us in so many areas are missing. The risk appears bigger when it's not counterbalanced by something meaningful. So find something to make yours. The simplicity there is beautiful. Complex ideas expressed in simple ways are always worth holding on to, right? We are programmed to lose because we are programmed to live according to someone else's standard, to think small, to ask ourselves, how do we not screw up? But when you can step outside that little self-imposed circle and instead ask yourself, what's something I can create that is my own, something I care about, that I can nurture, invest a part of me into, that's when life really starts paying dividends. You're not existing, you're living. Or as I've recently discussed, you're empowering yourself to not just sit in the room, but be in the room fully. I use entrepreneurship as the model for this discussion because that's been such a huge part of my life, where I've been injecting my time and attention and risk. But the point is not that everyone needs to stop what they're doing and become an entrepreneur. That's one path of many, obviously. The point is that there is a risk-reward dynamic in entrepreneurship that we should all understand, extract, and inject into our own lives where it best applies. We've learned to settle in so many ways that we must know there is tremendous value in asking, what is it in my life I want to invest in, make mine, give myself the opportunity to experience the excitement of defining the things I care about and watching them grow. Right? Whether your current arena is entrepreneurship or motherhood, fatherhood, academics, a particular relationship, some combination of these, or anything else, to make magic out of the mundane requires we first make it ours. We take ownership, responsibility for the journey. We accept the risk and chase down the rewards. You can do amazing things when you realize what you're capable of and commit to its manifestation. So in a world where, yes, we are conditioned to fail, step out from those subtle shackles of learned helplessness. You are anything but helpless. It's just that you've yet to reach out and pull your dreams into your orbit. You've yet to put a stake in the ground and say, this matters, and it's time to see it through. Because once you do that, the good stuff begins. I often ask myself, what differentiates those who wish for better outcomes and those who do something about it? What separates the dreaming from the progress and the wishing from the reality? Sure, life is complex. There are a lot of moving parts to understand. But I think this element is simple. Those who build things in life are willing to not only see a reality that hasn't yet materialized, but they also understand that in a world of no, they have to be the yes. They have to believe in their ability to drive towards finish lines that no one else sees. And see, meaning cannot come to fruition without that discomfort. Or as Nietzsche put it, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star, and that's just it. Most people see what is, most people conform, they do not create. To change something means you have to be the metaphorical eagle amongst pigeons, flying above all that, everyone, everything else, superseding the limiting beliefs that shackle others to their one-dimensional realities. But most importantly, it means you can see. You can see what no one else can. You have line of sight to what no one else understands. See, in this world, no one walks up to you on the street, puts their arm around you and says, hey kid, that dream, follow that, because I can tell you're going to do big things. No one says, hey, that business idea, you're going to thrive next year, I know it. That relationship, it's going to happen. That level of fitness, oh, I can see it already. Nope. People see what's right in front of them. And as it pertains to you and your world, your life, people are those pigeons. And so that leaves you with a choice. Do you accept that? Do you blend in, take the scraps you're allowed to consume, the crumbs laid out in front of you? Or do you step back and acknowledge that this is going to be tough, this is going to hurt, it's going to push me further as a person than I've ever been pushed? But you know what I get in return? That view. I get to live above the clouds with those who don't wait in line. No, they become the main attraction. They transform what is into what will be, because the world, it has a way of ensuring that we really want what we say we do. Greatness in any area of life is reserved for those willing to carry forward when most would turn back. To build a bridge to something greater when most people point out that your bridge is not connected to anything, that it's a waste of time, it's trivial, useless, irrational. Good. Changing your life in the world around you has to be irrational. Taking the status quo and shaking it, saying, I'm going to alter this landscape, is irrational. But from irrationality comes the future. So when you feel like the world is against you, when you have an uphill battle to climb, when there are a million reasons for you to turn around, understand that this is nothing more than an indicator that you are right where you need to be, against the current, bringing something new to life. See, if it were easy, it would already exist. But changing your life, that makes you an architect of the unseen. So build. On the days you want to, build. On the days you don't, build. When they understand, build. And when they assume you've altogether lost your mind, build. Sure, it's not easy, but it's worth it. And when tomorrow comes, and it looks a lot different from today, when you've grown, evolved, transformed, and you look back and don't even recognize the person you once were, that won't be because you listened to the chirping of the doubters and the naysayers. It won't be because when strangers told you to give up, you packed your bags and went home. No, it will be because you rose above all that. They saw empty space and you saw a world undiscovered. They saw your head in the clouds while you built those castles in the air. You were always on a trajectory to something greater. You didn't need to convince them. You needed to convince yourself. To unlock the shackles and take to the sky, leave everything that once held you down behind. This isn't about anyone else. It's about the conversation between you and the horizon that awaits. Sometimes we convince ourselves that right now isn't quite right. It's not the wrong time necessarily, but soon. We'll have that thing that will make the perfect launch point soon. So we'll wait. Right? You hear it a lot with hopeful creators, right? As soon as I get the camera, I'm going to start the podcast. As soon as I feel inspired, I'll start writing. Or how about this one we can all relate to in some way? As soon as it's January 1, I'll start taking care of myself and my health. And I'm not talking about this because I read about it. I'm talking about it because I live it. It's an adversary I'm always up against. The allure of waiting for that perfect moment. But here's the deal. When you start now, the imperfections become part of the value. People see imperfections and become inspired by them. He started getting in shape in his garage with 2 dumbbells. Look at that. She started writing her novel in a notebook, waiting to pick her kids up from school. Right? Going now not only destroys that enemy that is procrastination, it also gives you something of value in return. It lets the very fact that you found a way become a narrative in your story. It allows your imperfections to become your greatness. I recently relocated my studio to Scottsdale, a move that, according to the moving company, would take 7 to 10 days. 24 days later, I realized that there are places in life where you can attempt to cut costs. Moving companies should never be one of those things. I found myself with the recording equipment in my camera bag that I travel with and some empty boxes. Right, I'm waiting for my stuff to show up 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Soon it'll arrive. And I'll be able to record then. Because right now there's no lighting. Right now I don't have my tripod. I don't have anything to, put behind me in the set. It's like, wait. Or how about this? You take the empty shelves and you make them intentional. You lean boxes against the wall. You have a life transition set, right? And not only can you make that work, not only will it look sufficient, but it's like you have a story now. We like to hear about the times others made something out of an apparent nothing. It's relatable. And that's actually where the fun stuff is in any conversation. I'm recording this in a hotel room, doing what I can with what I have. And so when you find yourself feeling not quite ready and the temptation is to wait, rather than hold out hope for a fake perfection that never comes, why not unpack the beauty contained in the present moment? Or put a much more practical way, the opportunity contained in the present moment. Why not begin with less and tap into something that no other time in your life will have but now? Start your podcast using your phone. Mediocre visuals and echoey audio. Let this be the beginning that you look back on and smile. Remember how fun those episodes were? That mediocre at best equipment and stories about where we were in life. Start working out now. Can't get to the gym? Do it in your garage, in your living room. Then you can point to where it would have been easy not to, but you built your physical foundation on the 3rd floor of an apartment building in New York. People ask you, what it took to get into the shape you're in now. Weights and a floor. Just start. I find repeatedly that it's not about perfect. It's about who we become in making progress with far less than the perfect we'd hoped for. That's what makes you realize, how much of what we tell ourselves is just rationalization. We're scared to not look good. That's all. We're scared of new things, worried about beginning. And so we convince ourselves that the camera angle will make all the difference. The expensive lens will be the differentiator. Again, I've lived this. Right? And then you get it, and it's like, in truth, the new camera just sits there. You're still the person in front of it. And what you say in front of your phone versus a $2,000 Sony is still entirely dependent on you. Surprise. Like, the Sony doesn't have much say. And so I call you to think less about the set and more about what's going on within it. The amount you can do with what you have now will astound you. How little we need is truly magical. And these last 3 weeks have emphasized that for me. 2 pairs of shoes, 2 pairs of jeans, some t-shirts, and a camera. I didn't miss much. Because my ability to think and share ideas didn't get packed away and put in the truck with everything else. That stayed with me. And we all have some version of that in our own lives. That's what matters. You are LeBron at something. So cherish that. Bring that to the world, regardless of the circumstances. You can put LeBron on a broken down court with no nets. He'd still be pretty good. Right? The environment becomes something different, something enjoyable because of its novelty. Too often we miss the value, because of the details. So, I'll end with this. Don't seek perfection. Seek to start now with what you have so that you can give more of yourself to the world. You can give more of yourself when you're unsure. Give more of yourself when you're lost. Give more of yourself when you're starting. Give more of yourself when you don't have all the tools you wish you had. Give more of yourself at the beginning. Give more at the middle and at the end. Anything that suggests you need some miracle in the mail before you can begin or tap into what matters is fear. It's nothing more and nothing less. So start. Start for the world and for the story you'll be able to share by simply initiating the climb. That thing that gives you butterflies, that lights you up, that world you see when you close your eyes, chase that with all of your soul. Chase it. It's easy to brush off life's potential. It's just outside the realm of possibility. To see the ideal as some form of window shopping that you can almost touch. A fantasy to be explored when you sit back in your office chair or pass time in the doctor's office waiting room. But I think these aspirations mean more than that. Not distractions, but a North Star. Not a diversion, but the path. And by the way, I'm not naive about this pursuit and all that it entails, the truth behind it. I'd never advocate that what's possible or meant to be is somehow easy. In fact, I'd argue the only way something is meant to be is if you're willing to commit to the difficulty in bringing it to life. Otherwise, it wasn't meant to be anything but a missed opportunity. Because it surely will be a difficult road. And here's what we come to learn: everything of value is difficult. And in an attempt to oversimplify, I often break life down into the easy thing versus the difficult but meaningful thing. And in some ways, sure, that's true. But I can also honestly say it would have been more difficult for me to have stayed where I was, not moved at all, to not have pursued what I believed in. It would have been more difficult thinking about that life I could have lived, the doors that could have opened, and that's just it. Life is about choosing your difficult. The difficult you seek out intentionally, or the difficult you come and let take control, render you helpless. And I think when we find ourselves in routines, or we've built for ourselves a world, we know we don't want to live in anymore, or we've outgrown, it's not that the current is real and the future is not. It's that we, somewhere along the way, decided to face the wrong opponent. Some adversaries make us stronger. They force us to be more, to grow. Other adversaries or opponents, they sit back and they let us defeat ourselves, and that's what we don't want. See, when the world knocks you down, you get to rise again. Wiser, tougher, stronger. But when you keep yourself down, well, there's nothing to be gained from that. Those two opponents, they are not the same. I reference my speaking career because for me, it's where that transformation is most evident. It's where it all began. My opponent was very much me. Avoiding opportunities, hiding from failure. I didn't give life a chance to knock me down. And so it didn't. How could it? I'd already placed myself in chains. And because of that, guess what? I stayed the same. I couldn't evolve. My ideal future was an idea that would briefly entertain me from time to time and move right on. It wasn't until I found the courage to switch my opponents. From myself to the world, I let life humble me. I gave talks where I was nervous and had cold feet. Keynotes where my delivery was mediocre at best, where I barely got by. But with these battles came metaphorical riches, came that trust that had to be manufactured, that confidence that had to be earned. When I got out of my own way, I was able to let the trials and tribulations of life create a new foundation for me to stand on, to redefine reality. And the good news is that anyone can do that. Anyone can ask that question. Is something external in my way right now that I need to figure out, that I need to solve? Or am I in my own way? Am I not even giving myself a shot? Have I settled for right now as truth? When right now is just the less ideal difficult. When I was little, playing action figures with my buddy up the street, we used to think it was cool to see around corners, to see through walls, to know what was coming before it arrived, right? For action figures, absolutely. In superhero movies, why not? But in the journey through life, you don't need to see around corners. In fact, it's counterproductive because it is the interaction with the unknown that matters. It's adjusting amidst life's uncertainty that comes to make you who you are, transforms you and your reality. As far as I'm concerned, the only way to lose is to remain behind that corner, peering out every now and then, hoping to get some kind of advantage or shortcut, willing to let life pass you by while you wait for the stars to align, thinking that that vision of an ideal life will stroll along the sidewalk, see you and reach out a hand. That wait will be a long one, unproductive and difficult, more difficult than trusting yourself to face whatever lurks around that corner. So remember that who you are is built, and every time you do something a little bit scary or unsettling, every time you wander a step or two outside of your comfort zone, the reward is not just the short-term triumph you feel as you leapfrog that obstacle and carry on. No, you are investing in a new you, a new reality. You're investing in something changing before your very eyes, putting a little marble in a jar that is your potential, and you can't see it, not now. No one's going to announce it to you. You might not even realize or understand until you look back years down the road. But those little acts of courage, they matter more than you know. They're not trivial, and they are certainly not insignificant. When that movie plays in your head and you think to yourself, I wish, or if only, and the delta between that image and the reality on the ground disappoints you, gives you a little knot in your stomach or dissatisfaction that floats around in your thoughts, remember that that feeling is transferable. That difficult can be exchanged for one that actually changes things. You can get off the merry-go-round and towards a new North Star. Difficult, yes, but we've seen the goal is not to avoid difficult. It's to pick the difficult that will transform your life. It's to find meaning in a world that, if you do not pay attention, will paint your landscape with routine and obligation. And today can certainly be a continuation of that script. A box that's checked, a calendar square with an X. Or it can be the beginning of something that gives you butterflies, that lights you up, that brings you one step closer to the world you see when you close your eyes. Life is perspective. So during the good times, find gratitude. And during the difficult times, find the opportunity. When you have the answers, when you know, be proud of your knowledge. And when you don't, celebrate all the wisdom to come. When the sun is shining, cherish the warmth on your skin, and when it's not, learn to run in the rain. When you're focused, appreciate the clarity. And when life feels chaotic, embrace the chance to manufacture order. When people come into your life, value the ride that you'll share. And when they leave, take note of all they gave along the way. When you win, reflect back on all the hard work that made it possible. And when you lose, take in the lessons that even winning can't provide. When things go as planned, revel in your ability to execute. But when your plans and life's plans diverge, remember that some things are simply outside of your control. And now, this moment, is a chance to identify and utilize the things that are in your control. Henry David Thoreau, it's not what you look at, it's what you see. So see the world as you'd like it to be. Never turning a blind eye to reality, but realizing how much control you have over making reality your own. We are the builders. The world around us merely provides the components and the pieces. And if one were to live as though there were value in every moment, they would inevitably find themselves looking for that value, perhaps even when it was difficult to find, most elusive, when most would hang their heads and walk right by it. I look out my window and see a world that is neither valuable or valueless. I see a blank canvas in which we are tasked with making that decision. Life is a roller coaster ride. It has ups and downs, the obvious and the unexpected. And while some think nothing of the high points and dwell on the low points, There are an abundance of resources, of beauty, of joy reserved for those who understand how great the highs are and how valuable the lows. Who take what comes not as walls to live within, but as parts to assemble. Not as antithetical to their hopes and dreams, but as the very foundation they will build those hopes and dreams upon. This world is not for you just as much as it is entirely yours. It calls for you to be that arbiter. For what you decide will inevitably take shape. Just imagine if we implemented into our lives all those things we already knew would make us better. Imagine if we became masters, not just of knowing, but of transforming knowledge into motion. A friend of mine, Tyler, will reach out every once in a while after listening to one of the episodes, and we'll just kind of riff back and forth on the content. Chat about the overlaps, the differences, most importantly, how we can each in our own world be a little better, happier, and healthier. Tyler recently built and sold a tech company and is now transitioning into a new chapter of his life. And in essence, starting over, which is something I can in many ways relate to. And this morning I got a voice note and said, man, imagine if we implemented wholeheartedly the things we knew to be true. Imagine if we could execute for ourselves with the same advice that's so obvious when looking out at the world, at others. And I thought, oh man, right? As someone who spent a decade thinking and philosophizing about this stuff, this is a very real and valuable question. Not only that, it sort of comes at a perfect time. And here's why. Right? Those of you who have been listening to the channel or podcast for a long time, you know this, for me, has been one great adventure. Documentation of a journey. Starting with the first video I ever released, Ode to Excellence, which was essentially me promising myself just to give this creator thing a try and not go back to what I knew to be safe. To videos like Running in the Rain, where I discuss my coming to understand the value of identifying as a person who does the hard thing. To speeches like Make You Proud, where all I'm really doing is, during hard times, assuring myself that things will be fine. To more recently, where sure, I'm finally seeing some of that growth and 10 years of effort compounding, but now grappling with brand new challenges. Right? Since day one, I've been coaching myself through the ups and the downs, but what are these stories? What do they provide for me, or for those who listen to them? Well, in a sense, they're the lessons learned. They paint a portrait of the ideal. They're merely information. Yes, life gives you more when you ask more of life. And yes, discomfort is often the cost of admission. Yes, you can get through life's greatest storms if you take it one step at a time. And yes, the challenges we face evolve and the context changes, but we are equipped to confront and handle them. Guess what though? None of that information matters if we don't act on it. If we're not using the past to recreate the present. Those stories are my map. But even the best map in the world is meaningless unless it's being utilized. And Tyler's very simple and direct question was valuable to me in that it did two things. First, it made me think, Eddie, look back at your journey. Look what you've overcome, right? In a number of ways, you've learned. You know what needs to now be done. and simultaneously prompted me to ask. And so, now, this very moment, what are you doing about it? I love the lesson. I think there's art in our struggle and beauty in the overcoming of our suffering. But if all those lessons, if the ideal remains stagnant like a caged bird, what's the point? That wisdom must be set free, and that only happens with a targeted, deliberate effort. I felt this sense of excitement, invigoration in asking myself, how can I highlight the doing? Where can those wheels hit the road faster? How can I delve further into those very epiphanies I love to explore? Something that I'm encountering now that's both fun and challenging is the transformation from, really being a solo creator, speaking, writing, producing in his studio, to seeing the process as a business owner, to building a support structure and systematizing workflows, right? As a friend has said to me before, a little less Mickey Mouse in order to be a little more Walt Disney. And it's happening, but the truth is, right, you don't get where you're going the same way you arrived where you are. So how can the old lessons be turned into action now? Knowing my world changes the second I decide to act is like having an unused arsenal at my disposal. Knowing my foot is barely touching the pedal is power. And we can all focus on that actualization of our knowledge. We can all ask, what's one thing I can do today that I know that I need to, that perhaps I wouldn't have, if I didn't give myself a little push. I love the idea of that simple diagram where you draw a line straight down a page, and on the left side you're listing your current obstacles, the things that are really bothering you, or the reasons you're stuck, and then on the right, one single thing you're going to do about it. All it does is reinforce action, and action is everything. Because to Tyler's point, I really know what needs to be done. We all really know what needs to be done. Not how things will end, or maybe what the finish line looks like, but we know now. We have a gut sense of what we need to do, and where the opportunity lies. We're aware, we understand. So a world where we become masters of doing is a world where we transform beyond our wildest imagination. And the things I talk about, they can ultimately in my life become everything, or wither away into nothing. They can sit there as a supposed to, an ideal, and ultimately I wish I did. All that depends on what I do with it and how I choose to act when I'm uncomfortable, moving into a new space. The same can be said for anyone listening to this. You're equipped with at least a starting point. You probably know what you don't like. You're probably aware of some things that must be eliminated or left behind. But knowing that is only as good as your first step. So are you willing to partake in the doing? In taking the little pieces of wisdom and breathing life into them by walking out your front door? By looking in the mirror and trusting in your ability to adapt, to change, to grow. In a world of complexity, let's simplify. We know what must be done, so let's focus on the doing. And on the journey, if we misstep or miss the mark, adjust and move again. Because we know there's nothing more tragic than doing nothing at all, right? Do something today that takes an axe to the tree of stagnation. Not everything, but one thing. When you are in motion, that world seems to conform, to rearrange around you. So here's to giving life the opportunity to make that happen, to giving yourself the opportunity to experience it. As Tyler stated, just imagine if we implemented wholeheartedly the things we knew to be true. Not kind of, or sort of, but with the same or greater intensity, and in many cases intentionality, it took to acquire the knowledge. What would that look like? Let's move now. Let's swing away. Let's uncover that world where your lessons translate to feet on the pavement and reality in the palm of your hand. Yesterday I drove out a little bit into North Carolina, parked the car, found a path, and went on a long hike to take in some scenery, think about life holistically, kind of contemplate where I'd go from here and why it matters. Which is always funny to think about, right? The idea of having to carve out time amidst our frantic and often chaotic journey to get somewhere, to, well, define where somewhere is. But I think about that a lot. Our days consist of so much running around that I can easily forget what even my calculated decisions add up to. Why? It's a simple enough question, perhaps one I could ask more. Why? What's with this whole get comfortable with discomfort thing? Why do I place so much emphasis on the quote-unquote path less traveled? Which is a term that, one of my buddies was recently giving me a hard time about using in all my speeches, right? It must mean something to me. It's got me here. But is here better than over there? After all, it's not out of the realm of possibility that I'm the one who's missing the mark. And it's okay to examine that possibility. In fact, that's why I'm here. And I bounced this around in my head as I made my way up the trail and noticed as I looked around, everything just felt perfect. Have you ever had one of those moments where it just seems surreal? The morning was incredible. I loved the sound of the earth under my feet as I took each step, the chirping of the birds in the early morning, the sun making its way through the trees. And I thought, it's amazing that you can live 20 minutes from this feeling and just never experience it. I guess proof that a decision to not go, to do nothing, is still very much a decision. And in this case would have been the less desirable one. I'm glad I went. My phone was in my backpack, and for the first time in a while, I didn't even think about it. My mind was stimulated. My senses were taking in something new, something different, something not my studio or laptop or social media analytics pages. In fact, all that stuff felt kind of trivial now that I was removed from it. And I wondered, why don't I do this more? The thought popped into my head earlier that morning. I thought, hey, that's a cool idea. I just had to get through that initial pushback, the hesitancy of, well, what's the point? What's the desired outcome of a hike? Right? After all, this little jaunt's just going to distract you from your work and your progress. But at that moment, I think you have to just shut out reason for a second. You have to remind yourself that there's value, period. Otherwise, we open the door for rationalizing. We talk ourselves out of some of life's beautiful secrets. Sometimes you have to just go. And as I made my way down this trail further and further, I started to feel better. I felt reassured. Like I had something that I otherwise wouldn't have had. Something that's my own. And maybe that is it. Maybe that alone is the reason for everything. To collect those incredible things, large and small, that we might not have had. After all, isn't life just an accumulation of memories, of experiences that are spread out like a choose-your-ending children's book? And with so much control over the outcome, I think that matter deserves my attention. In order to acquire the good stuff, whether it's in a different location or context or time in my life, I still learn again and again that to get that, we have to leave some things behind. And that's the essence of life. You usually get out what you put in. And I think about that a lot. I think about the forks in the road I've come across, those same ones, the life-altering decisions. I guess it's only human. Walking away from that promising career that I'd spent my whole life building towards. Every once in a while, sure, I miss the security. Leaving this city and the people that made my life what it was, it still haunts me from time to time, trading permanence and structure for the freedom to condense my life's work into a laptop and take it anywhere in the world. But empowerment can be lonely, right? And I guess I can't help that in the midst of those situations, the easy decision always feels like the wrong one. I've just been pulled by the upside. I gravitate towards this grandiose version of what life could be on the mark that I hope to make. And to me, the scariest thing has always been not having the courage to see more, to explore. The phrase, what if, has always been my adversary, the monster in the closet, and it's a costly one to slay. Right? But life is both suffering and infinite beauty. And it's like you have to choose where you're going to endure pain and why that matters so that you can climb the mountain that means everything to you, that makes life worth it. In other words, meaningful discomfort now or painful regret later. And I strongly believe that life is about pursuing something meaningful. And even the triviality of a hike wants to remind me of this truth. I could be at home playing guitar, watching Netflix, relaxing. I mean, that would have been easier. But there's only one way to catch that sunrise over the trees. And that way is not Netflix. All those beautiful views, they require an output of energy to reach them. They come with fear of something going wrong and in doubt that perhaps the turn you made wasn't the best one, and that's okay. But I believe that happiness, to be truly fulfilled, requires trade-offs. And with each step, it becomes easier and easier to understand. For the gym rat, it's the discipline and the belief, knowing that muscles break down so that they can be built up. For the relationship to flourish, it's overcoming disagreements, accommodating the needs of that person that you love, so that they can be the last thing you see before you fall asleep. For the free spirit, it's walking away from what you know in pursuit of something that excites and invigorates, even if you're not entirely sure what it means. It's about enduring one so that you can collect the other. Now, what you choose to endure and what you choose to collect is up to you, but that's what makes life such a beautiful ride. A roller coaster taking you through lows to reach highs into darkness to see how life-changing the light is when it pushes its way through. Little decisions that become the collage that explodes off the paper when you step back and look. That's what you get back when you make a point to see more. That's why my love affair with the trivial and the mundane lights my path. It's not just a little thing. It's a microcosm of my everything. It's my saying yes to the opportunity that we work so hard to ignore in an effort to avoid inconvenience. But a life worth living is not always convenient. You could even argue at times it should be inconvenient, because the higher the climb, the more we give of ourselves, the more precious the world looks from the top down. In the challenging times, the things we sacrifice and leave behind, they're not so much a part of the picture as the paint on your palette. That in breaking down, you can now recreate using your own ideals, metrics, and guidelines, a world that you now have the ability to transform. That's why life to me is nothing more than color, decisions nothing more than paint, steps nothing more than brush strokes, and life, well, life is nothing and everything. Which, as the morning breeze reminds me, is a decision that is entirely my own. I used to think it was 100%. How do I get back to 100? Let's get this fully charged, no cracks or flaws, and so I'd wait. I'd rest, I would prepare. But guess what? Aiming for 100% is a perpetual almost there. Turns out life doesn't care much about 100%. It wants to know what you can do when you're at 80. Can you find a way to push through when you are at 75%? How about 65? See, life is innately difficult. How do you handle that? How do you compartmentalize it? I was recently back in Boston, running around the Charles River, first time in a while. Felt a little back spasm reoccurring. That right knee, a little sensitive as it often is, and I thought, man, again, if I waited for perfection to run, I would never run again. I can count on one hand the times everything felt great. Light bulb moment. We work towards that. We aim high, we give the body what it needs, but we also understand perfect is more of an idea than a reality. Sometimes you just have to lace up the shoes and go. Just like sometimes you have to wake up even though you're tired. Walk into the room even though you're nervous. Make the change even though you're fearful. Cut ties even though you're sad or disappointed. There is no 100% that is going to come down and save you. Life will always provide the necessary ingredients to climb, to grow, and achieve. It does, though, leave it up to you to decide how bad you want it. So what's the plan? To wait until you're 100%? Until everything is perfect and you're living the problem-free life you dreamt of? Or is this a find a way now type thing? An acknowledgement that we aren't given perfection, but we are given enough to move forward anyway. An understanding that while most view discomfort as an end, greatness means seeing it as an invitation, an unavoidable cost to move into the realm of accomplishment. So while the rest of the world waits for their 100%, I dare you to conquer your adversaries while at 80. I challenge you to surprise yourself while at 70, to disrupt the status quo while at 65. There is no waiting here. There is no serenity in growth, and how could there be? Growth is a restructuring of comfort, a tearing down to build again. Yeah, I used to think it was 100%, but now I know waiting for that 100 just becomes hope and stagnation. No, we cross finish lines and reach mountaintops while manufacturing momentum and creating possibility. Yeah, anyone can succeed at 100%, but seldom do we get there. Seldom do we see that. So that leaves us with this simple question. What will you do where you are with what you have? What will you do now? I recently heard someone say, it's not about doing your best. It's about doing what's required. Are they different? Very. Here's my take. Doing your best has an emotional component attached to it. It's subjective. What exactly is your best? Well, it's a story that you tell yourself. A narrative opening the door to limitation. I've always found that when we put our backs against the wall and venture into scenarios where it's essential that we get something done, we somehow always find a way. When we leave no plan B for ourselves, we are required to make plan A work. And so we do. It's a testament to both the resilience and power contained in the human spirit, as well as the reality that we can astound ourselves when we're unwilling to take no for an answer. That it's not the resources that are the problem. It's usually our unwillingness to move forward into the dark, our hesitance to try, explore, test, build, and rebuild. Actions that are surprisingly unrelated to one's best and have everything to do with accepting nothing less than an identified outcome. One of the reasons I fell in love with the sport of running is because it reinforced this notion in my life. It became the template with which I could repeatedly amaze myself. I talk a lot about earning confidence, and oh, how I earned it. Step by step, mile by mile, day by day, in the sun, in the rain, in the desert, in the woods, through city streets, all over the country and the world, I came to understand the relationship between the turbulence of now and the satisfaction of later. It was on those days I'd push beyond my usual level of comfort, when that cloud of pain and agony would hover over me. I couldn't even really point to where my body hurt. It just all seemed to come together into this one giant hell, and to learn that I could not only endure that, but grow in those moments. To see myself rise above any preconceived notion or understanding of best in order to defeat my demons, conquer the day's objective, it changes the way you see yourself in the world. Now, could onlookers be tempted to call these self-created goals arbitrary, even unnecessary? Sure, and I get why they would, but I'd also completely disagree. Those days were a masterclass in doing what is necessary. Realizing that when you shut your rational brain off and don't give your mind a chance to talk your body out of it, you can see just how powerful you are. You realize that story of your best is nothing more than a house built on sand. Life is not about that story you've told yourself. It's not about your personal records and peak performances, what you think you can do or how far you think you might be able to go. It's about not stopping in the moments when it hurts. Doing what is required, a decision that compounds over time to create what was once impossible. One of my favorite quotes is by Admiral William McRaven, an absolute hero of mine. And funny enough, he says, if you want to change the world, you must be your very best in your darkest moments. And what a beautiful idea, to rise when life presents its periods of turbulence. And sure, it may be a matter of semantics, but in those moments of darkness, I think of your best, not in the traditional sense, not as a personal metric, but as a willingness to do what must be done, a removal of the spotlight from you altogether and instead pointed directly at the road ahead, at the task at hand. When you choose to make the journey not about what you can and cannot do, but instead make it about what must be done, the universe, as Paulo Coelho has so elegantly stated, conspires to make it happen. I think back to my journey, and at so many periods, my best wasn't good enough. I was so lost and so overwhelmed that the only thing I could do was not stop moving. That was my superpower, simply trudge through the fear of things falling apart, the nagging pride and hurting ego. And what I learned was that life is no different than all those miles I'd put in running. How I felt, or what my previous capabilities were, what I deemed my best to be, it was all noise, it was all irrelevant. What was required was that I move forward through the chaos and to something better, and so I did. And in your world, so can you. The stories we tell ourselves are so powerful, and in many ways valuable in our journey through life. But there's one narrative that eliminates the necessity of so many others. You can get to the top of whatever mountain you are seeking to climb so long as you do not stop. So long as you let go of the limitations tied to your quote-unquote best and instead do what is required to get there. You'll see how adaptable and transformative that best really is, how it's a lagging indicator. It will take time, but you're capable of being patient. And it will have its moments of chaos, but you are capable of weathering those storms. It will present obstacles that leave you unclear, uncertain, sometimes unprepared, but you're capable of picking your head up and moving through that haze. What you know of yourself now is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what you're capable of doing. And how far that goes will be determined not by putting a stake in the ground and calling it your personal best, but as Emerson has said, by hitching your wagon to a star and pulling yourself towards its light, a little bit at a time. This episode's going to be a little different, perhaps a little heavier than usual. I want to talk about the power of reaching out. How simply being there for someone can make an unfathomable difference. Right? We tend to think of, a monumental impact requiring monumental action, and sometimes that's simply not the case. Sometimes it's just showing up and letting someone know that, hey, I'm in your corner. And I've been thinking a lot about this, right? This came to mind because over the past couple weeks, I've had two people I went to high school with pass away, right? Young men in their mid-30s, gone. And by the way, they're two of many people from my high school that have either OD'd and died or taken their lives. It's an epidemic. And I'm sure it is across the board, right? But being that I am one and hear about it often, I know that particularly young men are feeling isolated. They're feeling lost. They're feeling depressed. The pandemic exacerbated this quite a bit, right? It's a problem. And it's a complicated problem. Right? You can point to a lot of things. The way we connect now doesn't actually make us feel connected. We can't trick our brains into thinking that followers online are the same as friends grilling steaks with us in the backyard, right? It's different. But it's not only isolation, right? I think there's a crisis of meaning, of purpose, of feeling a part of something. There's a societal void. I don't think there's any question about that. And in my little corner of the universe here, I talk frequently about the process of growing a business, of building a brand. A lot of you are in the midst of the same thing. And so I delve into the highs and the lows, the ups, the downs. I have convos about it live. And I can tell you, right, nothing was as challenging as the loneliness of trudging through that, right? The middle. Not rejection, not failure, not being humbled by life, not being broke. No. It was the feeling of solitude, right? Almost haunting. Right? And you could make the argument part of that self-induced, right? It was focused. Social life took a back seat. But regardless, it was very real. And what was worth gold were the texts from family saying, hey, I watched your video, great work. Or it was my friend Zach, out of the blue saying, hey, this will be worth it. You're onto something. Don't you dare stop. And call me on a Tuesday just to get me excited about my own company, right? And when you're deep in the battle, that's not a little thing. That's not like a smile and appreciate it thing, that's everything. That validated my reason to get up when things were difficult. One message. Right? And let's be real, right? My process was not catastrophic. I had it pretty good. That was a pretty fortunate situation. My brain goes to imagine the people really fighting, right? Really going through something. Battling with their demons. And I'm reminded, as I watch all these people from previous chapters of my life decide the pain of being here is too much, that we can help. No, we're not magic. And no, there's no singular cure to a complex issue, but I'll tell you what, we all have the power by taking 30 seconds to shoot over a message that says, I love you, or I see how hard you're working, or keep pushing because your effort matters, to give someone hope. That stuff is life-changing. And not only that, costs us nothing, but can mean everything on the other end. Some of the email responses I get from my newsletter just reminds me, it's like, you don't know what people are fighting through. You don't know what demons they're living with when you walk by them on the street, right? And if we can be the ones to be a bit more compassionate, the ones where hope and reassurance is derived and then distributed out to the world, think about how incredible that is. How amazing it would be to simply be a part of that. And for those of you going through it now, thinking, I would love to. I will spread that message, but my own glass feels empty right now. I'm having a hard time getting through in my own world. I want you to know two things. One, you're not alone. A lot of us are going through it with you, in our own arenas, fighting our own battles. So don't think this is a burden placed solely on you. Life is hard. That's the challenge, but it's also the beauty. Which leads me to number 2. There will be, I promise you, a point where you look back on the storm of right now and smile because you made it out. You're different now, better equipped now, stronger now. That's not a possibility, it's an inevitability. As Churchill is famously quoted saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. Because you're strong enough and what awaits will be worth every second of the journey. I wish we could see that in the middle, understand that in the thick of it, but we can't. That's not how it works. That's why we need to remind others, and it's why I'm reminding you. Life is a beautiful thing, but beauty can't exist without its inverse. We all endure chaos so that we can appreciate the calm. We all endure valleys of despair so that we can experience the rush of climbing out. It's a duality that's not always fun, but appreciating that is liberating. So keep going, keep trusting, keep pushing through. Hope is the greatest gift one can give. So give it to those around you and let it evolve into strength in your own world. It matters. More than you know, it matters. There's a saying that some people feel the rain, others just get wet. I've always found this interesting, this idea how the same subject, same situation, or occurrence can be interpreted so differently,
right? It can plant the seeds for such different outcomes. Like Yoshimi and Koga mentioned in their book, The Courage to be Disliked, well water is 60 degrees, and it's always 60 degrees in the summer and the winter. But depending on what time of year, right, the makeup of the outside world, that 60 degrees feels different. The water didn't change, its circumstances did, and our thoughts are no different. It's not the world that writes the story, we do. And every second, moment, day is merely an interpretation. Does time tick by? Or is it driven into a state of flow? Is it transformed into something more? Was losing an indicator that, hey, maybe you're not good enough? Or is it your motivation to be better than you've ever been? Is your day an allegiance to the present or an invitation to chase down tomorrow? See, the world doesn't get to tell the tale. The world is paper, it's ink, it's ideas. The world is everything you need to decide how your story's going to go. How does he see the world? How does she define reality? That's the question. Because you don't need to change the world, you need to change the way you see it. And you don't need to change who you are. You need to change the imaginary shackles you've placed around your ankles that are limiting the heights you could reach. In fact, the world, as far as I'm concerned, is an accumulation of thoughts, ideas. It's 8 billion individualized movie screens attempting to interact, to coexist together. And when you look at it like that, it's not that your mindset plays a role or it's kind of important. No, it's that it narrates the play. It's the glue that ties everything together. What you see is what you get. And this isn't a one and done thing, it's an everyday thing. Because there's always going to be occurrences in our lives that challenge us, that threaten our understanding of who we are and what we're capable of. There will always be the temptation to make the opportunity into the problem and the hero into the villain. But why forfeit that control? I remember hearing that if you find time to be grateful, both in the morning and at night, it changes your life. Not because the world transforms, but because it reinforces the perspective you need. We are lucky to be here. We're lucky to have challenges that push us forward. Lucky to have ups and downs that bring us closer to the people in our lives. We're lucky that chaos and discomfort open a door for transformation on the other side. And look, I get life isn't perfect. And not everything can be great all the time. But I do believe that if we can bring ourselves to stop, to breathe, to even focus briefly, we can find value in any situation. What's in front of you, it exists, right? It's the well water. You can't go back in time or remake the obstacle at your feet, but you can always decide how to make that work for you. And that's a superpower. And I use that. I use it when my short-term ideas or videos or projects underperform. I use it when people let me down. I use it when in the moment I'm either under or overwhelmed. The question, where is the win? In this spot, this situation where most would hang their heads and let the outside world rewrite the story, how can I find a way to hold mine high and maintain my own accountability? Extreme differences in life outcomes are so often prompted by such subtle realizations, subtle decisions. Their reason to stop could be your reason to not only carry on, but thrive. And the best news is you don't need approval or authorization. You don't need the stars to align or doors to open up. You just need to give yourself permission to see the sun amidst the clouds, the hope amidst the doubt. You have to remind yourself that there is always something to cling to, always a second chance. There is always a win. All you have to do is choose to see it. There's something about the way we perceive success that results in one of the greatest tragedies of our time. And that's the belief that successful people, the ones at the top of their game, that talent is what punched their ticket, that destiny brought them to the finish line. And that's wrong. It's wrong because it takes the journey, the struggle, the scratching and clawing that it took to get to the top of the mountain and throws it out the window. It completely mitigates what's most important. In the real world, the one we are living in, it doesn't matter who you are never entitled to a result. Victory is a product of the fight. The biggest favor you can ever do for yourself as you progress through life's up and downs, through the good and the bad, when things get rough, is know that you are going through what every successful person, every champion, every innovator has gone through in the history of mankind. Struggle is beautiful. It's a sign that you are in the midst of what separates great from average. It's a necessary step, and it's the most important step you will ever take, because 99% of people can't see past it. Right? The world sees struggle, sees hardship as a time to pack it up, to walk away, to be intimidated. But the best, I'm telling you, they look at struggle differently. Just like you can't get fit without blood, sweat, and tears at the gym. You can't make deals without the hustle. You can't make things happen if you don't move forward in the face of adversity. When the word no is staring you in the eyes, it's all part of the process. Winners walk on. If you want something bad enough, you know that being uncomfortable is an ingredient. If you want to be the best, your mindset has to reflect the best, right? Let others focus on the tip of the iceberg. You know excellence lies in everything underneath the surface, in what cannot be seen. So take mediocrity and make it excellence. Take what's yours and hold it up for the world to see. Because what hurts now in the present is the very same thing that will transform your life down the road.
The message in this episode was inspired by some background music. The very music playing behind my words right now, actually. I have this thing for acoustic tracks. I just feel like they completely change the dynamic of a story. But I digress. I was writing earlier, opened my notes, found a topic I wanted to discuss, spent about 2 hours on it. But as I listened to this song and looked over my words, I just felt like what I'd written didn't do it justice. Do you know that feeling where maybe it's your work or any other aspect of life, really, where you know what you have is good enough, like no question, good enough to get by, maybe even better than average. But at the same time, you have this little voice in your head, almost guilt, because you know there is within you something better. Like, sure, this will get you through the gate, but you just know you're conceding something. And it's that curiosity, that question, what could I have created and given to the world, that just pulled me in a little deeper. I was recently in Cincinnati with one of my oldest friends, Mike. We met in 4th grade, and we've been in touch ever since. And we were having dinner talking about how we were always in trouble back in the day. And I mean, we were always in trouble as kids. Went to a little Catholic school in Southern California. And the way they disciplined us back then was they had this system where if you were talking when you shouldn't be, you'd get a T for talking. and that T basically counted as 1 strike. If you did something besides talking that was inappropriate, you'd get an I, which I presume is for inappropriate, and I's counted as 2 strikes. And we couldn't really remember what the system was completely, but I think we landed on, if you got up to 7 total strikes before the end of the week, you'd get a note sent home to your parents. And we were going back and forth, kind of disagreeing on the effectiveness of that system. The classic carrot versus stick argument. Mike thinks it was a great system, and certainly there was a lot of value there. It kept us in check to an extent. But I saw it differently in the sense that all it did at times was rearrange incentives. Like if it's Friday afternoon and I'm sitting there, I only have 1 T for the week. You bet the teacher turns around, I'm throwing that apple-shaped stress ball right at the back of Mike's head. I've earned myself a little breathing room over the course of the week. Why not do just enough to avoid that note going home to Mrs. P? And it just seems like, looking back now, that a reward-based system might have been more beneficial. Right? Instead of tiptoeing around and manipulating the rules so that we could avoid those negative outcomes, why not learn to aim to reach for more, right? For the positive outcome. And here's why I'm going down this rabbit hole, because I know this seems trivial, but here's the honest truth. It took me into my mid-20s to unlearn this in even the most basic sense. Certainly not just because of my elementary school. It's how we're all raised, right? To avoid the negative. To do enough to avoid punishment or embarrassment. It's not about mountaintops, it's about dodging the T's and the I's, learning and manipulating this system to get what we need so that we have just enough. And as an adult, I'm not talking merely finances here. I'm talking relationships. I'm talking health. I'm talking all aspects of life, right? That little voice that we all have, we all know it. The one that said to me 2 hours ago, yeah, this speech is fine. You'll avoid missing your deadline. You'll feel like you got everything done on schedule today. You won't have to call your editor or postpone anything. But how good do you feel about it? Because you're capable of more. This is good, but somewhere behind that curtain, there is great. No, I'm not saying this episode is going to be, third in history behind King's I Have a Dream speech and the Gettysburg Address, but the message means something to me. It means everything to me. The ability to leave good in pursuit of great changed my life. And most of the time, not even in the larger than life sense. I'm talking about the little things. I'm talking about the courage to walk away when I had to fight for more when I felt slighted, to get out of bed when I felt like my ego was crushed. In a world where we're conditioned to find and settle for adequate, that little perspective shift lit a fire in my soul, which honestly, if anything, just makes life more fun, more exciting, more impactful. When you feel like you're generating meaning in your own life, it puts color into the mundane. And that's the message that I want to leave you with. When you hear that little whisper in your soul, that question, is this your best? Is this who you want to be? Is it where you want to be? Why not entertain it? Dive into the curiosity. Walk through the door and see what lives on the other side. At worst case, the decision's reversible, as most are, and you backtrack to the start and repeat the cycle. But at best case, life opens up. And sometimes it's a hard conversation to have with yourself, no question. Sometimes it hurts being that vulnerable with the person in the mirror.
But your soundtrack deserves a story that matters to you. And you don't find meaning running from the T's and the I's. You don't find contentment hiding in the shadows of life. You arrive where you're supposed to be by following that curiosity straight into an evolved version of yourself. By listening when the voice asks, "Is this where you were meant to be?" We all fall down, but only a few choose to get back up. A few depersonalize failure. A few understand that falling is the cost of greatness. See, your reality is not what happens to you. Your reality is how you internalize what happens to you. Are obstacles stop signs? Or are they checkpoints along the way to something greater? Checkpoints that make you stronger, build you up, become your armor. That is ultimately the difference. What we misinterpret in life is the meaning behind that difficulty, that pain, that suffering. No one gets a pain-free life. No one gets a free ride. Suffering is inevitable. As Nietzsche says, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. And what's changed my life, and I don't mean here and there, I mean truly transformed the course and trajectory of what's possible, is simply redefining that which is difficult. I grew up watching the Kobes and the Bradys of the world. I remember thinking, how do these guys get better when things get difficult? I mean, as a kid, I could feel the pressure watching from the couch, but they somehow elevate themselves when the odds are stacked against them. Same exact situation that causes most to doubt, to run, to lose their self-belief. What they see that eludes most is that in every pressing moment, there's opportunity. Every loss has something to gain. In every failure, there is victory. Everyone has the same rule book. It's just that some people only see what is right in front of them. Others learn to read between the lines and create outcomes that have not yet arrived. When things are hard or challenging or uncertain, it's not that you should keep going. It's that you must keep going. Everything good, everything rewarding, worth having is on the other side of that struggle. Everything meaningful is built from the days you felt like there was no possible way to move on, but did anyway. That is the core of greatness. Carrying forward when it would have been easier not to. When you feel the hurt, the emotional turmoil, and I get it, we all do, but beyond that feeling, what are you willing to see? Beyond the ashes, what are you willing to build? What are you willing to do with those pieces? Because it can be nothing or it can be everything. It all depends on how you choose to step back and look at the world. Your perspective becomes the roadmap for your reality. So understand that feeling down or lost is normal, but staying down is a choice. There are no problems. There are stepping stones, the very situations that make you who you are. The little decisions that over time equip you to step up when it matters most. When the pressure's on, the odds are against you, the rest of the world says no. No matter how hard it gets, there is an answer. Rise above the emotion, the chaos, the present moment, and see the big picture. Not only will you survive, you will be better because of this. Because you kept moving forward when it wasn't easy. No matter how hard life got, you never lost sight of the opportunity. And that made all the difference.
The moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1. A quote attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte regarding his troops' morale in battle. Victory starts and ends with mindset. So, the myth or story goes, Napoleon had a coin. And he was known, prior to embarking upon particular battles, to flip this coin. He would say, if it lands on heads, my friends, it's not our day. We weren't meant to fight. We'll stay here and fight some other day. However, if it lands on tails, the gods are on our side. We're meant to charge into battle and collect our victory, for it is destined. And every time this coin landed on tails, the army would proceed into battle. They would march into the onslaught of oncoming bullets, of weapons and fire raining down on them. And they would collect their victory. And as time passed, Napoleon died, this coin was eventually found. And upon examination, something interesting was uncovered. The coin was tails on both sides. This coin had nothing to do with the gods. It was about preparing his men for victory in their minds before ever stepping onto a battlefield. It was about believing in an outcome before pursuing its realization. This is life. To believe something's possible is perhaps the greatest weapon one can have in their arsenal. When you believe something is possible, the question goes from, can I, to how will I? The gap is bridged. The terrain is crossed. Because time is not exhausted on the likelihood of the outcome, but on its materialization. I heard someone say years ago that some of the most incredible things in history were accomplished by people too ignorant of the odds to be held back by them. Dreams are self-fulfilling prophecies. They require one be crazy enough to willingly navigate the enemy's fire, to step into hostile territory, put a stake in the ground, and live as though you were meant to be there. To operate knowing the unknown is where answers live and excuses die. It's believing that the world doesn't dictate your fate. It just adds variables to the story. It puts building blocks at your feet, places a paintbrush in your hand. You are the only one who chooses whether to stop or go, to quit or continue. Life can place obstacles before you, but only you decide whether to bow down to them, navigate around them, or march directly through them. We win behind our eyes before we go into the world and collect our medals. The moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1. So close your eyes. Win your victories, then go out into the world and collect them. You don't have to know everything. In fact, you don't even need to know most things. But you do have to know that progress often calls for us to move forward without knowing. It asks that we're willing to learn along the way, to pick up the pieces as we walk by them. And that's a vulnerability that is sometimes tough to face, right? It's a nakedness that we never really shake. The idea that in order to grow, we have to leave the now, ill-prepared for tomorrow, but knowing that we have everything we need to make the transition. The losses become lessons, the failures become data points, the mistakes become our clarity. And until we understand this, there really isn't an upward trajectory. We place too much value on the known, the things we understand, the cyclical nature of a day-to-day that is, as much as life can be, predictable and determined. Characteristics that are actually antithetical to growth. In fact, one could make an argument that in this incredible day and age of information, our need and ability to know often comes at the expense of true transformation. Right? I studied podcasts for so long before I started one that I could have created and improved upon my own, 400 times over. I had to find out who uses what, when to upload, how long the episode should be, and on and on. There are books and videos, there are classes and coaches. All of it wonderful, I'm sure, in its own way. But nothing so powerful as that university of experience, of life. The idea of the thinker and the doer. The thinker that absorbs and contemplates, weighs one option versus another and another. Exhausting time sufficient for the doer to fall on her face twice, pick up the pieces, make necessary changes, and be on her way. See, the information is out there. It exists and can be incredibly valuable, but simultaneously can contribute to us thinking our way into stagnation. A thing can only be what you make it. Right? Things provide the value you decide to extract from them. I like using the example of water because it's simple. Water is necessary to sustain life. Without it, one cannot go on. Too much of it, however, can sink a ship or flood a building. Too much is disastrous. And you can, pretty much fill in the blank with anything else here to demonstrate that point. Life is a balance between not enough and too much. Scarcity and excess. But my opinion is that now, with regard to information and technology, we exist on the too much side of the spectrum. I can't even remember the last time I was having a conversation about something I wasn't sure about without interrupting it to pull out my phone and Google the answer. Again, this has its positives. Knowledge is power, but to what extent? And I'm talking big picture here. This is about so much more than, picking up a phone to Google information. This is about never feeling like we're equipped enough to step into something new. Because we can always be obtaining more.
And it's like, where do you draw that line? I now, because of the accessibility of information, find myself frequently staring like a deer in headlights because some minor detail hasn't been made clear to me. Because everything is not perfectly ironed out. My brain has become conditioned to know. Because knowing is now incredibly easy. But life is about generating a meaningful existence. Meaning is carved from unknowns. It's not Googled or found on Wikipedia. A podcast or YouTube video can't give you meaning. It might help you prepare or point you in the right direction, but meaning is about self-discovery. It's about, taking those things you learn, but giving them life. It's pulled out of the world around you like diamonds from the earth. Necessarily calling for going when you don't know exactly what the destination looks like. Starting when you don't know what the end result will be. We are consuming at the expense of living, absorbing at the expense of feeling, right? There's the idea that a business book is not the same thing as creating a business. Being on social media is not the same thing as being social. It's an aspect of those things served up without the risk or the upside. That is not real life. In one of my favorite movies, Good Will Hunting, Robin Williams' character, a therapist, is talking to Matt Damon's character. He plays this brilliant young man who has, a photographic memory. He's read every book in the library. He's a genius. But even with all that, he doesn't quite have the courage to move out of his little world into something bigger, into the opportunity that's available for him if only he'd find the strength to seek it out. And here's a segment of Robin Williams trying to explain that to Matt Damon. He says, so if I asked you about art, you'd probably give me this skinny on every art book ever written. Michelangelo, you know a lot about life's work, political aspirations, him and the Pope, sexual orientation, whole works, right? But I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You've never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling, seen that. If I asked you about women, you'd probably give me a syllabus on your personal favorites. You may have even been late a few times. But you can't tell me what it feels like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy. You're a tough kid. I ask you about war and you'd probably throw Shakespeare at me, right? Once into the breach, dear friends. But you've never been near one. You've never held your best friend's head in your lap and watched him gasp his last breath looking to you for help. I look at you. I don't see an intelligent, confident man. I see a cocky, scared kid. And the quote goes on, but the idea is a powerful one. And one of the reasons I've rewatched that scene over and over, it's not that he's trying to belittle the character. He's trying to help him explore the depths of his own personality, his needs and desires, trying to arm him with the understanding that he's strong enough to move beyond the walls he's built around himself. That all that knowledge he's obtained and acquired is meaningless unless he gives it life. Knowing isn't enough. And I want to qualify this again because it's important you meet me where I am. I'm not making a case for ignorance or, books, knowledge, understanding. That's critical. But it's the other piece that makes life worth living. You don't get the reward without the risk, and the risk requires that one moves into the haze without clear understanding of an outcome. It's moving into life without total certainty. And we are hardwired for that certainty. We're built to want to know. And now on top of that, we have the tools to take in infinite knowledge. I want this to be a reminder that we have to circumnavigate that idea to some extent. We have to trust ourselves to figure things out as we go. That waiting until we have everything figured out simply leaves the door cracked for regret to sneak in and make itself comfortable. There's an entire world out there waiting for you not to have it all figured out, but to instead stumble upon the realization that you don't have to know. To move forward, you have to simply trust. That's when the world will transform before your eyes. Remember what's yours to control and what's not, what must be let go. Remember that nothing is so futile as attempting to move the immovable or change the unchangeable. Remember that your greatest strength is focusing your time, talents, and efforts, exhausting your energy on that which you can control. And sometimes this distinction hurts. But to fail to see it is to shackle oneself to delusion. Right? You can complain about the weather all day, but to complain about it, to focus on it, to be stuck in it is not going to change it. Your time would be better suited looking at how to adjust yourself to it. And that's what life repeatedly tells us. There's plenty we aren't happy about, plenty we wish we could change. But to stay there in that space is to forfeit your greatness, your strength. Why? Because there is so much you can control, so much you can do. You can always position yourself to succeed. But that calls for first separating what's yours and what's not. Right? There are people I wish were different. There are situations I prayed were alterable. There are outcomes that are given without my asking. That's just life. And a losing mentality is to fight that, to feel anger or resentment at the people that let you down. Why couldn't they be how I want them to be? It's to dwell on the situation that occurred despite your wishes. Why couldn't it have just happened my way? It's to refuse to acknowledge the outcomes that have already materialized. Right? Why couldn't it just have evolved differently? All that, as hard as it is to see, is embracing a mentality of victimhood. It's walking down a path that has no desirable destination in store for you. When you accept the unchangeable, you then become the architect of your reality. Sure, people, places, and outcomes weren't always the best, but now you ask, how can I navigate around it, or better yet, use it to my advantage? It is, to use the famous metaphor, not shaking your fist at the wind, but building sails for your boat, creating a path to take you somewhere new. So let the energy, the time, and emotion that's wasted on the immovable dissolve. The question worth asking is, where do you most want to be, and how can you get there? And while those details outside the scope of your control can feel like a bottomless gap in your way, I promise that what's around you is enough to build a bridge over it. There's enough there for you to find your way, so long as we learn to separate the gap from the bridge, the details from the solutions. When all you see is why you can't go, or how it can't be solved, or how impossible something is, it's not that you are looking at an unfortunate truth, it's that you are looking at the wrong supporting evidence. When we stop seeing the details and outside circumstances as the deciders of fate, we win. When we place our eyes upon the controllable, when we step into what is ours to move and shape and transform, we finally see that the journey to something bigger is not only possible, it is inevitable.